For most women in India, menstruation is synonymous with various cultural practices, such as avoiding strenuous physical work, taking rest, avoiding certain types of food, not going to the temple, and so on. The most common reason that has somehow percolated our society is of women being impure during menstruation. Nothing could be further from the truth. About 3 years ago, my team and I began our search into what might be the origin of these practices and what was their purpose. Our search took us to 9 states across India, and we spoke to people from different indigenous communities, different faiths and belief systems, and even different scientific backgrounds. This is what we learned. None of the practices were meant to suppress women. In fact, none of them have anything to do with purity or impurity. And unlike popular perception, these practices are not rooted in religion, although they may feature in religious texts. We found that the cultural practices pertaining to menstruation came into being as a measure to prevent menstrual and reproductive health issues. We also learned that most of these practices are rooted in indigenous sciences. In our case, Ayurveda. Now, when we think of Ayurveda, the picture in mind is of this ancient sage busy grinding away all sorts of herbs with a mortar and pestle. And then we think of modern medicine, and there is the image of this well-dressed doctor with a stethoscope surrounded by technologically advanced diagnostic machinery. But how modern is modern medicine really? Modern medicine is based on the principles of classical science. Therefore, the atom is considered as the basic building block, from where you have molecules which come together to form the cells, which group again to form tissues, which come together again to form organs, and then we have the various systems that we know of: digestive, respiratory, reproductive, and so on. But wait a minute, why is modern medicine still talking in terms of classical science when other fields have adopted the quantum approach to science? What is the quantum approach? The quantum theory talks of things at the subatomic level, saying that everything here behaves both as a wave and as a particle. Heisenberg, the father of the architect really of quantum mechanics, said this: underlying all physical matter is an intrinsically interconnected, dynamic network of energy, leaving nothing isolated in the universe. Essentially, this means that all of us and everything around us is made up of waves of energy, and we are constantly interacting with and influencing each other. So what would it look like if medicine were based on quantum science and not classical science? It would look a lot like Ayurveda. And in that sense, Ayurveda is more modern than modern medicine. Today, I'd like to give you a glimpse into the deep science behind Ayurveda, because it is only through the knowledge of the basics of Ayurveda that we can even begin to interpret the cultural practices around menstruation correctly. Since Ayurveda works at the quantum level, it goes beyond the atoms and the molecules and dives deeper to the level of the biological forces that causes disease and are responsible for the atoms and molecules to behave as they do. Let me give you a simple example. Let's take the case of heavy menstrual bleeding or menorrhagia. One of the reasons for women to bleed profusely is a hormonal imbalance. So the common treatment in modern medicine is called a hormone therapy. wherein artificial or synthetic hormones are given to the patient to reduce the menstrual flow. As most of you know, there are side effects. Whereas in Ayurveda, the treatment is not directed at the hormones, but instead it is directed at the biological forces that cause the hormones to become imbalanced in the first place. As these forces return to their natural equilibrium state, the hormone secretion is regulated naturally, the body's natural rhythm and balance returns, and menstruation too becomes normal. So you see, unlike what most of us think, Ayurveda is not about replacing chemical drugs with plant-based drugs. No. In its purest form, Ayurveda is about the body's ability to heal itself and how you can play a role in facilitating this process. So what are these biological forces that Ayurveda talks about? There are three primary forces recognized by Ayurveda. They are called the Tridoshas. The first I will tell you about is the Vata dosha. Vata dosha regulates all the movements in the body. Then we have the Pitta dosha, which oversees all metabolism and transformatory processes. And then there is the Kapha dosha, which is responsible for maintaining strength, stability and structure within the body. The Tridoshas occur in different combinations in all of us, and they are responsible for our personalities, for our health, and in women, our menstrual cycles. During the first week of the menstrual cycle, which is just after your period, there is a dominance of Kapha dosha. Now, since Kapha represents strength and stability, this is the time when most women feel very energetic, have more stamina, and we can actually accomplish more physical work. In the entire menstrual cycle, this is the most stable time for women because it is marked by Kapha. After that comes ovulation. During ovulation and the week after that, there is a dominance of the transformative energy of Pitta dosha. Just a few days before the period, many women may feel that there is an excess body heat and the skin erupts into acne. This is because of the increased Pitta at this time. The process of the blood flow itself, menstruation, is marked by a dominance of the Vata dosha. Vata regulates all movement, including the movement of the menstrual blood. It is in fact Vata that sends the signals to secrete the hormones which initiate menstruation. So if there's any disruption in Vata, it could result in a hormonal imbalance and consequently menstrual disorders. Similarly, if there is any aggravation of Pitta, that too could impact Vata. So this is the basis of most of the cultural practices around menstruation, preventing the Vata and the Pitta from becoming disrupted. For example, we are told to take rest during the period. And this is because the Vata, which regulates the movement, can easily get aggravated if women are into sports or travel excessively during their period. Similarly, food that is very cold or very dry aggravates Vata. Food that is very oily or spicy or non-vegetarian food can aggravate Pitta. And that's why we are told to avoid these. There is one more point we need to understand in order to understand another set of cultural practices. Vata dosha has 5 subtypes. Each one regulates different functions in different parts of the body. The subtype of Vata, which regulates the reproductive functions in the lower part of the body, is called the Apana Vata. The Apana Vata is what is responsible for the movement of waste out of the body. During childbirthing, it is Apana which helps to push the fetus out. It is the same Apana Vata that is responsible for the downward and outward movement of menstrual blood. It is something like the gravitational force within the body, which makes sure that the direction is always down and the functions associated with it happen smoothly. If during menstruation, women engaged in activities that somehow changed the direction of apana or blocked its natural course, it could result in menstrual problems. For example, inverted yogasanas or gymnastics practiced by menstruating women could invert apana. Or having food that is difficult to digest and ends up blocking the apana would force the apana to find another path, changing its course. And not visiting temples. Just as the Indian medicine is rooted in quantum science, so is our architecture, especially temple architecture. The ancient temples were places where when people went in, their own bodily forces were turned upwards by the forces in the temple. That's why we are told to go to a temple on an empty stomach and after having relieved ourselves, so that it does not interfere with the biological forces that are involved in digestion or waste elimination. But if you look at a menstruating woman, for whom the apana vata is always meant to be downwards. Now if she entered a temple, the forces in the temple are likely to turn the direction of the apana. The immediate impact would be that she would experience severe menstrual cramps because of the apana being pulled in an opposite direction. And that's the reason why traditionally women are told not to go to the temples during menstruation. Some of you might be thinking, I've done these things during my period and nothing much happened. Well, the right way of putting it would be nothing much happened which I noticed. Our mind is so used to everything being loud that we often miss subtle changes that happen in the body. But if we continue to put ourselves in spaces or undertake activities that repeatedly invert the apana or block it, then the long-term effects might not go unnoticed. It is said that repeated inversion of the apana vata would cause the menstrual blood itself to change its direction and flow upwards. As bizarre as this may sound, it is very similar to a condition recognized in modern medicine and called endometriosis. The endometrium is nothing but the lining of the uterus which normally sheds when women menstruate. Although modern medicine is not sure of the exact cause of endometriosis, one of the theories called retrograde menstruation says that in women affected by endometriosis, during menstruation, a portion of the endometrial tissue and the menstrual blood backs up and flows into the fallopian tube, implants and stays in the abdomen and grows there. As with all cases of apana inversion, endometriosis too is an excruciatingly painful condition. But this condition may have been prevented had we understood the science behind menstruation more deeply. Try not to intellectualize what you just heard. Instead, try and experience it. Having the body of a woman means that you have the tools to experience a deep science which modern medicine does not yet have a language for. Next time when you bleed, observe what your body is telling you. Be still, be silent, so you can listen to the message that your period is conveying. Your menstrual cycle is the proof of the existence of a deep science. It would be a shame to let it go by unnoticed. Thank you.